The elevator descended into absolute darkness, its ancient cables groaning against the weight of secrets buried 3 miles beneath the Earth's surface. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her face to the reinforced glass, watching as layers of rock swept past like pages in a book written by time itself. But tonight, she wasn't here to study geology. Tonight, she was chasing whispers of something that shouldn't exist. Welcome, seekers of the impossible, your guide through the shadows of human knowledge, where the most incredible discoveries hide in plain sight, close to history for sleep. I'm your eyes. Let the darkness embrace you and prepare to descend into a mystery that could rewrite everything we think we know about our planet. Because tonight, we're exploring a question that has haunted explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. What if there's a hidden civilization living inside Earth? Picture this. You're standing at the mouth of a cave system so vast that entire cities could exist within its chambers. The air carries sounds that don't belong, whispers in languages that predate recorded history, the distant hum of technology that seems both ancient and impossibly advanced. Your flashlight beam dissipate doors that stretch veneers into corrid comprehension, carved with a precision that makes modern engineering look primitive, and somewhere in that impenetrable darkness, something is watching you. This isn't science fiction. This is the reality that a growing number of researchers, explorers, and government officials are grappling with in secret facilities around the world, from the deepest caves of Romania to the abandoned mining shafts of Siberia. Evidence is mounting that Earth's interior may harbour more than molten rock and precious metals. It may harbour life, intelligence, and civilizations that have thrived in darkness while we stumble through our brief history in the light. The evidence starts with the caves themselves. Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, the world's longest known cave system, stretches for over 400 miles of mapped passages. But here's what they don't tell tourists. Less than 10% of the system has been explored. The remaining 90% disappears into chambers so vast that sonar equipment fails to map their boundaries. Cavers who venture too deep report anomalies, structures that appear artificial, air currents that suggest massive open spaces far below the mapped regions. In 2019, a team of speleologists exploring an unmapped section of the cave discovered something that changed their understanding of what lay beneath. Dr. Marcus Chen, a geologist with 30 years of underground experience, found himself standing before what could only be described as a doorway. Not a natural formation shaped by water and time, but a deliberate construction. The opening was perfectly rectangular, its edges smooth as glass, carved from bedrock with a precision that modern diamond-tipped tools struggle to match. "I've spent 3 decades underground," Dr. Chen would later write in his confidential report to the National Speleological Society. "I know the difference between nature's work and something else." This was something else. The doorway led to a chamber that defied explanation. The walls were covered in symbols that resembled no known writing system, yet somehow seemed familiar, as if humanity had encountered them in dreams or ancestral memories. The ceiling soared beyond the reach of their most powerful lights, and the floor was paved with stones fitted so tightly that not even a blade of grass could grow between them. But most unsettling of all was the silence, not the natural quiet of deep caves, where water drips and air moves through hidden passages. This was the silence of a place waiting, as if something had been listening to their approach and chosen to hold its breath. The team documented everything they could before a sudden rockfall sealed the entrance, trapping their evidence behind tons of limestone. Official reports claimed the collapse was natural, caused by the team's presence destabilizing ancient formations. But Dr. Chen's private notes tell a different story. The rocks that fell were too large, too perfectly positioned. Someone or something had closed that door deliberately. Similar discoveries have emerged from underground locations across the globe. In Romania's Carpathian Mountains, The mobile cave remained sealed for 5.5 million years before scientists broke through in 1986. What they found inside challenged every assumption about life on Earth. The cave harbored an entire ecosystem that had evolved in complete darkness, feeding not on sunlight, but on chemicals produced by bacteria. Blind spiders, transparent scorpions, and worms, unlike anything seen on the surface, thrived in an atmosphere toxic to surface life. But Mobile Cave held secrets beyond its unique biology. In chambers too dangerous for public exploration, researchers discovered artifacts that shouldn't exist. Tools made from metals that don't occur naturally, arranged in patterns that suggest deliberate placement. Crystalline formations that pulse with their own internal light, creating constellations on chamber walls that mirror star patterns visible from Earth's surface. And in the deepest accessible chamber carved into the living rock, the chamber half a world away. The Romanian symbols, identical to those found in Dr. Chen's seal government, classified the discoveries immediately. The cave remains off-limits to independent researchers, accessible only to a select team of scientists who sign agreements that bind them to silence. But whispers escape, as they always do. The cave extends far deeper than official reports acknowledge. Ground-penetrating radar has detected massive chambers at depths that should be impossible, spaces large enough to house entire cities, and sometimes, late at night when the surface world sleeps, monitoring equipment picks up sounds from the depths, not the random noise of geological activity, but rhythmic patterns that suggest intelligence, organization, purpose. The phenomenon isn't limited to natural caves. Abandoned mines across the world have become hotbeds of unexplained activity. The Berkeley Pit in Montana, a former copper mine that became a toxic lake, has been the site of numerous reports from security personnel. Lights moving beneath the poisonous water, structures visible in the depths that weren't there when the mine was active. Workers who once descended into the deepest shafts before the mine's closure reported finding tunnels that weren't on any company map, passages that led to chambers filled with air that glowed with phosphorescent bacteria. In Siberia, the abandoned diamond mines of Mirny present an even more compelling mystery. The Mir mine, a massive open pit that descends over 1,700 feet into the earth, was officially closed in 2001. But satellite imagery shows continued activity in the area. Trucks that enter the site but never leave. Lights that emanate from depths that should be flooded and impassable. Local residents report sounds from the pit, not the random noise of settling earth, but organized activity. Machinery operating in rhythm. Voices echoing from chambers that supposedly don't exist. The Russian government maintains that the site is used only for geological research, but the level of security suggests otherwise. The area is patrolled by military units typically reserved for protecting nuclear facilities. Unauthorized aircraft are turned away by surface-to-air missiles. And the research permits filed with international geological organizations don't match the scale of activity visible from commercial satellites. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a seismologist at Tokyo University, has spent 15 years studying the acoustic properties of deep Earth structures. Her research began with earthquake prediction, but evolved into something far more intriguing when she began detecting patterns in seismic data that didn't match known geological phenomena. Underground chambers creating acoustic signatures that suggested they were hollow, artificial, and occupied. The Earth is singing, Dr. Tanaka explained in a leaked audio recording from a 2020 conference. But it's not a natural song. The frequencies we're detecting correspond to structures that shouldn't exist at those depths, chambers with perfect acoustic properties, as if they were designed to resonate, to amplify sound, to communicate across vast underground distances. Her research team used military-grade listening equipment to map these acoustic anomalies. What they found challenged everything science teaches about Earth's interior. a network of connected chambers spanning continents, linked by passages that follow geometric patterns too perfect to be natural. The system extends beneath major mountain ranges, under ocean floors, connecting points separated by thousands of miles on the surface. And throughout this network, they detected the constant presence of organized sound. Not the random noise of geological activity, but patterns that suggest language, music, communication between intelligent sources scattered across the globe. The implications are staggering. If Dr. Tanaka's research is accurate, Earth's interior contains a communication network more sophisticated than anything humanity has constructed. A system that predates our civilization by potentially millions of years, operated by intelligences that have learned to thrive in conditions that would kill surface life within minutes. But who are they? What kind of beings could survive in the crushing depths, in darkness so complete that the concept of light becomes meaningless, in temperatures that would melt lead and pressures that would compress human bone to powder? The answer may lie in the scattered reports from deep-sea exploration, where the ocean floor gives way to underwater cave systems that seem to extend directly into the Earth's crust. In 2018, the deep-sea research vessel Orpheus was exploring hydrothermal vents in the Mariana Trench when its cameras captured something extraordinary. Structures on the ocean floor that appeared artificial, geometric shapes too regular to be natural formations. And moving among these structures, figures that defied classification. The creatures were humanoid in basic shape, but adapted for the extreme environment. Elongated limbs that moved with impossible grace under crushing pressure. Skin that seemed to absorb and reflect the research vessel's lights in patterns that suggested communication. Eyes that glowed with their own internal illumination, adapted for a world where the sun's rays have never penetrated. The footage lasted less than 3 minutes before equipment failure ended the observation. Official reports blamed the malfunction on water pressure, but crew members privately reported that the failure coincided with the creature's apparent discovery of the research vessel, as if they had deliberately interfered with the equipment to end the observation. Similar encounters have been reported by deep-sea mining operations, military submarines, and research expeditions across the world's deepest ocean trenches. Each incident follows the same pattern: initial contact with beings that appear highly intelligent and technologically sophisticated, followed by equipment failures that prevent detailed documentation. The consistency of these reports suggests either a coordinated cover-up or contact with a civilization that has learned to protect its privacy through technological means that exceed our understanding. The implications extend beyond simple curiosity about underground life. If these civilizations exist, they have been sharing our planet for potentially millions of years while remaining completely hidden from surface detection. They have developed technologies that allow them to thrive in environments that would destroy our most advanced equipment. They have created communication networks that span the globe without our knowledge. And they have consistently demonstrated the ability to detect and neutralize our attempts to study them. This suggests a level of technological sophistication that makes our greatest achievements look primitive. While we struggle to drill a few miles into the Earth's crust, they have apparently mastered life in the deepest regions of the planet. While we are only beginning to explore our own ocean depths, they may have been using underwater passages as highways for eons. While we communicate through satellites and fiber optic cables, they may have turned the Earth itself into a resonating communication device. The question isn't whether we're alone on Earth. The question is whether we're the dominant species, or merely the newest residents of a planet that has been occupied by far more advanced civilizations for longer than human history records. And if that's the case, why have they remained hidden? Are they protecting themselves from us, or are they protecting us from knowledge we're not ready to handle? The answers may lie in the deepest places on Earth, in chambers that have never seen sunlight, in passages that connect continents through routes we never imagined existed. But finding those answers requires descending into darkness so complete that it becomes a living thing, into pressures that could crush our bodies, into environments where the rules of surface life simply don't apply. As we prepare to venture deeper into this mystery, remember that some discoveries change everything. Some truths are buried so deep that finding them transforms not just our understanding of the world, but our place within it. The evidence suggests that Earth's interior may harbour secrets that dwarf every mystery we've ever contemplated. Civilizations that have watched our entire species evolve while remaining perfectly hidden. Technologies that could revolutionize our understanding of physics, biology, and the very nature of life itself. But first, we must ask ourselves, are we prepared for what we might find? And more importantly, are they prepared for us? The darkness pressed against Dr. Sarah Blackwood's helmet as she descended through the Kola superdeep borehole, humanity's deepest penetration into Earth's crust. At 25,000 feet below the surface, temperatures should have reached over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Her instruments should have been failing. The crushing pressure should have made human presence impossible. Yet here she was, breathing filtered air in a chamber that shouldn't exist, staring at walls that pulsed with their own organic rhythm. The Soviet drilling project officially ended in 1994, abandoned due to unexpected high temperatures and technical difficulties. But the real story, buried in classified files that took Dr. Blackwood 15 years to access, painted a very different picture. The drill hadn't stopped because of heat or pressure. It had stopped because it broke through into something that was already occupied. The breakthrough happened on a Tuesday morning in October 1989. Soviet engineers monitoring the drill reported a sudden loss of resistance, as if the bit had punched through into empty space. The drilling mud, superheated and under tremendous pressure, began flowing into the void at rates that suggested a massive cavity. But when they lowered listening equipment to assess the situation, what they heard changed the course of the entire project. Voices. Human-like voices speaking in harmonious patterns that resembled language. The recordings which Dr. Blackwood obtained through contacts in the former KGB capture nearly 14 minutes of organized sound rising from depths that should have been molten rock. The voices speak in rhythms that suggest conversation, debate, perhaps even music. But the language, if it can be called that, predates any known human communication system. Linguistic analysis, conducted in secret by Moscow University, revealed patterns that matched no earthly language family. The phonetic structures suggested vocal cords evolved for different atmospheric conditions, possibly higher pressure, different gas composition. The speakers seemed to be breathing something other than the nitrogen-oxygen mixture that sustains surface life. Yet the emotional cadences were unmistakably familiar, suggesting intelligence that developed along parallel lines to our own, reaching similar expressions of thought and feeling through completely different evolutionary paths. The Soviet response was immediate and comprehensive. The drilling site was classified beyond top secret. The engineers involved were reassigned to projects in remote locations. The equipment was dismantled and buried. Official records show the project ended due to technical limitations, but the classified files tell a different story. The project ended because Moscow realized they had made contact with something that could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the world. Dr. Blackwood's current expedition represents the first attempt to revisit the Kola site since its abandonment. Using equipment that didn't exist in Soviet times, she's been able to descend further than the original drillers ever imagined. The passage she's following branches away from the original borehole, following natural caverns that seem to have been modified by intelligent hands. The walls show tool marks, but the tools that made them must have been designed for conditions that would destroy any surface technology. As she descends deeper, her equipment begins detecting atmospheric changes that shouldn't be possible at these depths. The air pressure is increasing, but not in the crushing way that would flatten surface equipment. Instead, it's becoming breathable, almost comfortable. The temperature, which should be approaching the melting point of lead, has stabilized at a pleasant 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Her instruments show oxygen levels that could sustain human life indefinitely, mixed with gases that don't exist in Earth's surface atmosphere. The passage opens into a chamber so vast that her lights can't reach the ceiling or far walls. But the space isn't empty. Structures rise from the chamber floor, geometric forms that blend architectural precision with organic curves. They appear to be grown rather than built, as if someone had learned to cultivate stone itself into desired shapes. The surfaces emit a soft phosphorescent glow that provides gentle illumination without any visible energy source. Moving between these structures, barely visible in the ambient light, are figures that challenge every assumption about life in Earth's interior. They move with purpose and intelligence, their forms adapted for this environment in ways that suggest millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Tall and slender, with elongated limbs that allow graceful movement in the higher pressure atmosphere. Their skin appears to have a crystalline quality that reflects and amplifies the chamber's natural illumination. But most remarkably, they seem to be expecting her. As Dr. Blackwood emerges from the passage, several figures approach without fear or aggression. They move with the confident bearing of hosts greeting an anticipated guest. Their faces, while clearly non-human, express unmistakable intelligence and curiosity. They gesture towards deeper passages, as if inviting her to explore further, to see more of their domain. The implications hit her like a physical blow. This isn't first contact, this is a reunion. These beings have been aware of surface humanity all along. They've been waiting for us to develop the technology necessary to reach them safely. The modifications to the natural cave system, the breathable atmosphere, the comfortable temperature, their accommodations, preparations for the day when surface dwellers would finally descend deep enough to make meaningful contact. Her radio crackles with static, then clears to reveal transmissions from the surface. But the voices aren't coming from her support team. They're speaking the same harmonic language she heard in the Soviet recordings, translated through equipment she doesn't recognize. The beings around her are communicating with others scattered throughout the global underground network, sharing news of her arrival, coordinating responses across vast distances through systems that make human telecommunications look primitive. As she follows her guides deeper into their domain, Dr. Blackwood begins to understand that she's witnessing the tip of an iceberg that extends throughout Earth's interior. The chamber she first entered is merely an antechamber to a civilization that spans continents. Passages branch in all directions, some following natural cave systems, others clearly artificial, all connected in a network that allows rapid travel and communication across distances that would take surface dwellers months to traverse. The architecture becomes more elaborate as they descend. Chambers carved from living rock with acoustic properties that amplify whispers into crystal-clear communication across vast spaces. Libraries containing information storage systems that use crystalline matrices to preserve knowledge for millions of years. Agricultural areas where bioluminescent organisms provide both food and light, cultivated with a precision that suggests mastery of biological engineering that far exceeds surface capabilities. But perhaps most stunning are the observatories. Chambers equipped with instruments that monitor surface activity with an accuracy that would make intelligence agencies envious. They've been watching us all along. Every war, every technological advance, every step in human evolution has been observed and recorded by intelligences that have made the Earth's interior their domain for longer than our species has existed. The beings communicate through a combination of harmonic vocalizations and crystalline instruments that create complex resonance patterns. Dr. Blackwood's translation equipment, designed for surface languages, struggles to interpret the nuances, but certain concepts come through clearly. They speak of the surface world as the bright realm and refer to surface dwellers as the young ones. There's affection in their communications, but also concern. They've been watching our rapid technological development with the same mixture of pride and worry that parents feel watching children grow up too quickly. Their history, as far as Dr. Blackwood can understand it, stretches back millions of years. They evolved during Earth's early periods, when the surface was still hostile to complex life. As conditions changed and new forms of life emerged above, they adapted to deeper environments, developing technologies that allowed them to thrive in the high-pressure, low-light conditions of the deep Earth. They watched the rise and fall of countless surface species, including several previous intelligent civilizations that humanity has no record of. The revelation that we're not the first intelligent surface species is perhaps the most shocking discovery. According to their historical records, preserved in crystalline matrices that can store information for geological time periods, Earth has seen at least 7 previous technological civilizations. Each reached a certain level of development before encountering challenges that led to their decline. Some destroyed themselves through warfare. Others exhausted their resources. A few simply evolved into forms that no longer resembled their origins. The underground civilization has served as observers and occasional guardians throughout these cycles. They've preserved knowledge from each surface civilization, maintaining libraries that contain the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of intelligent development. Technologies that could solve humanity's energy crisis, medical knowledge that could eliminate disease, philosophical insights that could guide us through the challenges of technological adolescence. All waiting in crystal libraries deeper than any human has previously descended, but they've learned to be cautious about sharing this knowledge. Previous surface civilizations that received too much information too quickly often used it destructively. The beings Dr. Blackwood is meeting have developed a careful protocol for contact, revealing themselves only when a surface civilization demonstrates both the technological capability to reach them safely and the wisdom to use their knowledge responsibly. Her presence in their domain represents a test, not just of human technology, but of human character. They've been monitoring our radio transmissions, our internet communications, our literature and art. They understand our languages, our cultures, our fears and aspirations. The question they're evaluating is whether humanity is ready to join a larger community of intelligence that spans not just Earth's surface, but its entire 3-dimensional volume. The test isn't academic. According to their observations, humanity is approaching critical decision points that will determine our long-term survival. Climate change, resource depletion, and social tensions are following patterns they've seen before in previous surface civilizations. We can either learn to manage these challenges sustainably or follow the same destructive paths that led to the disappearance of our predecessors. But unlike previous surface civilizations, humanity has developed something unique, a global communication network that allows real-time coordination across the entire planet. The internet, which we see as a technological achievement, represents to them something far more significant. It's the first time a surface civilization has developed the infrastructure necessary to function as a truly integrated planetary consciousness. This development has convinced them that humanity might be ready for a different kind of relationship. Instead of remaining hidden observers, they're prepared to offer limited contact, sharing knowledge gradually as we demonstrate our ability to use it wisely. Dr. Blackwood's successful descent to their domain represents the beginning of this process. The implications are staggering. Imagine energy technologies that could provide clean power for millennia, medical knowledge that could extend healthy human lifespans indefinitely, transportation systems that could allow rapid travel through Earth's interior, connecting continents through passages that bypass surface distances entirely, agricultural techniques that could feed billions without depleting soil or requiring vast amounts of water. All of this knowledge exists, tested and refined over millions of years of development by a civilization that has learned to live in perfect harmony with their environment. But the knowledge comes with responsibilities. The underground civilization has survived for millions of years by maintaining perfect balance with their ecosystem. Every technology they use enhances rather than depletes their environment. Every decision is evaluated for its impact on the long-term sustainability. They of their society have learned that true advancement isn't about consuming more resources or expanding more rapidly, but about achieving stable, sustainable relationships with the systems that support life. The question they're asking humanity is whether we're ready to adopt this perspective. Are we prepared to shift from a growth-based economy to a sustainability-based one? Can we learn to see ourselves not as masters of Earth, but as junior partners in a planetary community that includes intelligences we're only beginning to discover? Dr. Blackwood's encounter represents more than first contact with an underground civilization. It represents humanity's introduction to what these beings call the Deep Concordate, a governing council that has maintained planetary stability for over 12 million years. As she follows her guides through passages that seem to pulse with living energy, she begins to understand that Earth's interior houses not one hidden civilization, but dozens of them. Each species evolved in different geological periods, adapting to specific depths and environmental conditions. The crystalline beings who first greeted her are relative newcomers, having developed their civilization only 3 million years ago. Far below, in chambers where pressure reaches levels that would crush diamond, ancient silicon-based intelligences have maintained their society since Earth's formation. Above them, but still miles beneath the deepest human excavations, aquatic species have transformed flooded cave systems into underwater metropolises that span entire underground seas. The diversity is breathtaking. Beings who evolved from early arthropods have created hive mind societies that function as living supercomputers, processing information at speeds that make quantum computers look sluggish. Descendants of early plant life have developed into mobile, thinking forests that cultivate entire ecosystems within massive underground chambers. Some species exist primarily as electromagnetic patterns, inhabiting the planet's magnetic field itself, communicating through aurora-like displays that paint the walls of their crystalline cities with living light. Yet all these civilizations are connected through the Concordate, a governmental system that operates on principles humanity is only beginning to grasp. Instead of competing for resources, each species contributes its unique capabilities to maintain planetary equilibrium. The silicon-based ancients monitor and regulate geological stability, preventing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that could devastate surface or subsurface populations. The aquatic civilizations manage water table levels and ocean chemistry, ensuring that surface weather patterns remain within ranges that support life. The electromagnetic beings maintain the planet's magnetic field, protecting all Earth's inhabitants from cosmic radiation that would otherwise sterilize the planet. Dr. Blackwood realizes she's witnessing planetary management on a scale that dwarfs any human understanding of environmental stewardship. Every aspect of Earth's systems, from atmospheric composition to tectonic activity, is carefully monitored and adjusted by civilizations that have made planetary health their primary responsibility. The stable climate that allowed human civilization to develop wasn't natural luck. It was engineered by intelligences that have been maintaining optimal conditions for millions of years. The implications for human understanding of Earth's history are staggering. The ice ages weren't random climate fluctuations. They were controlled cooling periods designed to prevent runaway greenhouse effects. The positioning of continents isn't the result of random drift. It's been subtly guided to maintain optimal ocean circulation patterns. Even the extinction events that shaped evolution weren't entirely natural. Some were carefully managed population adjustments, designed to prevent any single species from dominating the planet's resources. Humanity, from the perspective of the Deep Concordate, represents both an opportunity and a challenge. Our rapid technological development has impressed the underground civilizations, our creativity and adaptability marking us as potentially valuable contributors to planetary management. But our tendency toward conflict and resource depletion has raised concerns about whether we can transition from a planet-consuming to a planet-sustaining civilization. The test Dr. Blackwood is experiencing isn't just about individual human character, it's about species-wide readiness for planetary citizenship. The underground civilizations have developed technologies that could solve every problem humanity faces, but they've learned through millions of years of experience that premature technological advancement can be more destructive than beneficial. They're evaluating whether humans can handle knowledge that could either elevate us to their level of sustainable development or accelerate our self-destruction. As she's guided through deeper chambers, Dr. Blackwood encounters the Concordate's historical archives, crystalline libraries that contain the complete records of every previous surface civilization. The stories they tell are both inspiring and cautionary. She learns of the architects, a species that emerged 80 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, who developed biotechnology so advanced they could literally reshape living organisms at the molecular level. They created the flowering plants that still dominate Earth's surface, designing them to optimize atmospheric composition and soil fertility. But the architects' success became their downfall. Their ability to modify life led to increasingly ambitious projects, eventually attempting to redesign themselves into forms of pure consciousness. The transformation process destabilized their society, leaving behind only the biological innovations that still benefit Earth's ecosystem and cryptic monuments in deep ocean trenches that human archaeologists have mistaken for natural formations. The resonance builders, who flourished during the Permian period, developed acoustic technologies that allowed them to manipulate matter through sound waves. They carved the initial chambers that many underground civilizations still inhabit, creating architectural marvels that sing in harmonies that can induce healing, learning, or transcendent experiences. But their mastery of vibrational physics led them to experiment with planetary frequencies, attempting to tune Earth's entire mass as a cosmic instrument. The experiment triggered the Permian extinction, nearly ending all life on the planet. Each civilization's story follows a similar pattern: brilliant innovation leading to overconfidence, ambitious projects that exceeded their wisdom, and ultimate failure that left only artifacts and lessons for those who came after. The underground civilizations have survived by learning from these failures, developing philosophical and governmental systems that prioritize long-term stability over short-term advancement. The Deep Concordate operates on temporal scales that challenge human comprehension. Their decisions are evaluated not for immediate benefits, but for consequences that might unfold over millions of years. They've learned to think in geological time, considering how their actions might affect planetary conditions across multiple evolutionary epochs. This perspective has allowed them to maintain stable, sustainable societies for periods that dwarf the entire history of human civilization. But this long-term perspective comes with costs. Innovation happens slowly when every change must be evaluated for million-year consequences. Artistic expression is constrained by the need to maintain social harmony across vast time periods. Individual ambition is subordinated to collective stability. The underground civilizations have achieved immortality at the cost of dynamism, wisdom at the price of spontaneity. They see in humanity something they've lost: the chaotic creativity that comes from short lifespans and rapid generational change. Our music, literature, and art fascinate them because it captures emotional and intellectual territories they can no longer explore. Our technological innovations, developed in decades rather than millennia, demonstrate problem-solving approaches that their careful, conservative methods would never discover. This is why Dr. Blackwood's presence represents such a significant moment. Humanity might offer the Concordate something they desperately need: fresh perspectives on ancient problems, innovative approaches to challenges they've been managing through pure stability rather than solving. In exchange, they could offer us the wisdom to avoid the catastrophic mistakes that destroyed our predecessors. The negotiation isn't just about sharing technology or resources. It's about potentially restructuring human civilization to operate on sustainable principles while maintaining the creative dynamism that makes us valuable partners. The underground civilizations are proposing something unprecedented, a hybrid approach that combines their million-year wisdom with humanity's innovative energy. But the transition would require fundamental changes to human society. Economic systems based on continuous growth would need to transform into models based on optimization and sustainability. Political structures focused on short-term electoral cycles would need to extend their planning horizons to encompass centuries or millennia. Educational systems would need to teach planetary citizenship alongside national identity. Most challenging of all, humanity would need to accept that we're not the dominant intelligence on Earth. We would be joining a community of beings whose knowledge and capabilities dwarf our greatest achievements. The psychological adjustment required for this transition could be as difficult as the technological and social changes. Dr. Blackwood realizes she's not just an explorer making first contact. She's a diplomat negotiating humanity's entry into a galactic-scale civilization that has been operating beneath our feet all along. The decisions made in these deep chambers could determine whether humanity joins the Concordate as partners in planetary stewardship, or continues on our current trajectory toward the same fate that befell previous surface civilizations. The beings around her communicate through harmonics that convey not just information, but emotional context, philosophical frameworks, and temporal perspectives that span geological epochs. Learning to think and communicate on their scale requires expanding human consciousness beyond anything our species has previously achieved. Yet they seem confident that humanity possesses the adaptability necessary for this transformation. As she descends deeper into their domain, following passages that extend beyond the reach of any surface instruments, Dr. Blackwood begins to understand that this journey isn't just about discovering what lies beneath Earth's surface. It's about discovering what humanity might become if we can learn to think like a planetary species rather than a collection of competing nations. The chambers ahead contain technologies that could revolutionize human civilization, knowledge that could extend human lifespans to match those of the underground beings, wisdom that could guide us through the challenges that destroyed our predecessors. But accessing this knowledge requires proving that we can handle it responsibly, that we can evolve beyond our current limitations to become worthy partners in maintaining planetary harmony. The test continues deeper than any human has gone before, into realms where pressure creates new forms of matter, where time moves differently, where consciousness itself becomes malleable. Here, in the deepest chambers of Earth's interior, humanity's future hangs in the balance, determined by our ability to demonstrate that we can grow beyond our origins to become something greater than we ever imagined possible. The path ahead leads through darkness so complete it becomes a physical presence, through challenges that will test not just Dr. Blackwood's courage, but humanity's capacity for transformation. Each step deeper into Earth's interior brings us closer to answers that could reshape our understanding of life, consciousness, and our place in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than we ever dared to dream. The pressure gauge on Dr. Blackwood's suit showed readings that should have been impossible. 30 miles beneath Earth's surface, in chambers that existed beyond the reach of seismic detection, she moved through spaces where physics seemed to operate by different rules. The crystalline beings who guided her communicated through harmonics that bypassed her ears entirely, resonating directly within her consciousness, with concepts that human language had never needed to express. Here, in the deepest accessible chambers of the Concordate, time itself behaved strangely. Conversations that felt like minutes according to her internal chronometer registered as hours on her equipment. The beings explained this phenomenon through acoustic patterns that conveyed meaning beyond words. Consciousness at these depths operated at frequencies that allowed accelerated thought processes, subjective time dilation that permitted complex negotiations to unfold in what surface dwellers would perceive as moments. The chamber she entered defied every assumption about matter and space. Walls that appeared solid became permeable when approached with the right harmonic frequency. Surfaces that looked like stone flowed like liquid when touched by beings attuned to their resonance. The architecture wasn't built in any conventional sense. It was grown, cultivated, sung into existence by intelligences that had learned to manipulate matter through pure acoustic intention. Dr. Blackwood watched in amazement as her guides demonstrated technologies that made human achievements look like stone tools. They approached what appeared to be blank wall and began producing complex harmonic patterns. The stone responded by flowering open like a living organism, revealing passage that extended beyond the reach of her lights. The wall wasn't carved or constructed. It was convinced to change shape through frequencies that spoke to the molecular structure of the rock itself. These weren't machines in any sense that human engineering would recognize. They were partnerships between consciousness and matter, relationships developed over millions of years between minds that had learned to think in geological timescales and materials that responded to sustained, focused intention. The beings had evolved beyond the need for external tools, developing in stare directly with the fundamental, the ability to interface forces that shaped physical reality. The implications struck Dr. Blackwood like a revelation that rewrote her understanding of consciousness itself. Intelligence, as demonstrated by these ancient civilizations, wasn't limited to biological neural networks processing electrochemical signals. It could manifest as crystalline matrices that stored information in quantum states, as electromagnetic patterns that inhabited planetary magnetic fields, as acoustic resonances that propagated through solid rock. The universe, she realized, was far more alive than human science had ever suspected. Her guides led her to an observation chamber, where the true scope of the underground civilization became apparent. Through walls that became transparent at the touch of harmonic frequencies, she could see passages extending in all directions like neural networks spanning the planet's interior. Bioluminescent transportation streams carried beings between distant chambers at speeds that would make surface transit look glacially slow. Living light pulsed through the network, carrying information, energy, and consciousness itself across distances that connected continents through routes that bypassed surface geography entirely. The network wasn't just a transportation system, it was a planetary nervous system. Every chamber, every passage, every crystalline node was connected in a web of consciousness that allowed the concordate to function as a unified planetary intelligence. Individual beings maintained their personal identities while participating in collective decision-making processes that operated at speeds and scales beyond human comprehension. They had achieved something humanity had only dreamed of, true collective intelligence without the loss of individual consciousness. Dr. Blackwood's neural interface, designed for human brain patterns, struggled to process the information flows she was witnessing. Her consciousness touched the edge of the planetary network and recoiled from the overwhelming complexity. Millions of individual minds thinking in perfect harmony about challenges that spanned geological timescales. Problems that human civilization might debate for decades were analyzed, evaluated, and resolved in moments by intelligences that could consider every variable simultaneously. Yet for all their advancement, these beings faced challenges that resonated with human experience. The chamber she entered next served as what could only be described as a grief repository, a space where the concordate processed the loss of entire surface civilizations. Crystalline matrices stored the final communications from species that had chosen self-destruction over sustainable development. The emotional weight of these records was palpable, filling the chamber with harmonics that conveyed mourning on a planetary scale. The architect's final transmissions played through acoustic crystals that had preserved their death songs for 80 million years. Their biotechnology had reached such sophistication that they could redesign their own consciousness. But their attempts to transcend physical existence had destabilized their society's foundation. The last of their kind had encoded their grief into crystalline matrices, leaving behind warnings about the dangers of advancement without wisdom. The resonance builders' records were even more haunting. Their mastery of vibrational physics had allowed them to treat the entire planet as a musical instrument, creating harmonies that could induce healing, learning, or transcendent experiences across entire continents. But their final project, an attempt to tune Earth's core frequency to achieve resonance with cosmic background radiation, had triggered tectonic instabilities that nearly shattered the planet. Their last communications, preserved in chambers that still echoed with their harmonic patterns, spoke of regret so profound it had become a permanent feature of the geological record. Each failed civilization's story was preserved not as historical curiosity, but as active memory, living warnings that influenced every decision the Concordat made. They had learned that intelligence without wisdom was more dangerous than ignorance, that technological power without ethical development inevitably led to extinction. Their survival depended on remembering these lessons, on maintaining the emotional and philosophical frameworks that prevented them from repeating their predecessors' mistakes. Dr. Blackwood began to understand that humanity's rapid technological development wasn't just impressive to the underground civilizations, it was terrifying. They had watched species after species follow the same pattern, brilliant innovation leading to exponential growth, followed by resource depletion, social fragmentation, and ultimate collapse. The speed of human advancement meant that the window for intervention was narrow, measured in decades rather than millennia. This urgency explained the unprecedented decision to make direct contact. Previous surface civilizations had been allowed to develop naturally, with the Concordat serving only as passive observers. But humanity's unique global communication network and our accelerating technological development had created a situation that required active intervention. We were approaching critical thresholds too quickly for natural wisdom to develop, yet we showed enough promise to justify the risk of direct contact. The beings surrounding Dr. Blackwood communicated their assessment through harmonics that conveyed both hope and concern. Humanity's creativity and adaptability impressed them, our music and literature providing insights into consciousness that their stable, long-lived societies could no longer generate. But our tendency toward conflict and our economic systems, based on infinite growth on a finite planet, followed patterns they had seen before in civilizations that ultimately destroyed themselves. The test Dr. Blackwood was experiencing wasn't just about her individual responses to their revelations. It was about humanity's collective readiness to accept fundamental changes to our civilization's operating principles. The knowledge they were prepared to share could solve every challenge humanity faced, but only if we could demonstrate the wisdom to use it responsibly. The chamber she entered next contained what the beings called probability matrices, crystalline structures that modeled potential futures based on current trends and intervention possibilities. The calculations were staggering in their complexity, taking into account variables that ranged from individual human psychology to cosmic radiation cycles that influenced planetary climate patterns. The matrices showed potential futures for humanity branching like infinite trees, each branch representing different choices and their long-term consequences. Some branches showed humanity successfully joining the Concordat, contributing our unique perspective to planetary management while learning sustainable practices that could ensure our survival for millions of years. These futures depicted human creativity channeled into projects that spanned centuries, artistic achievements that incorporated multiple species' perspectives, technological innovations that enhanced rather than depleted planetary resources. Other branches showed the consequences of continued current trends. Resource depletion leading to conflicts that escalated beyond our ability to control. Technological developments that outpaced our wisdom to manage them. Social fragmentation that prevented the global cooperation necessary for survival. These futures ended in silence, empty chambers where human civilization once thrived, joining the grief repositories alongside previous failed species. The probability matrices weren't predictions but tools for understanding the consequences of choices not yet made. They showed Dr. Blackwood that humanity stood at a crossroads where every decision, individual and collective, influenced our species' ultimate fate. The underground civilizations weren't offering salvation. They were offering partnership in a process that required humanity to fundamentally transform itself. The transformation wouldn't be imposed from outside, but would need to emerge from within human consciousness. The beings could provide knowledge and guidance, but they couldn't force wisdom or maturity. Those qualities had to develop naturally through choices made by individuals who understood the stakes and chose long-term sustainability over short-term gratification. Dr. Blackwood realized that her role wasn't just as an explorer or even as a diplomat. She was serving as a test case for humanity's capacity to expand consciousness beyond individual and national concerns to embrace planetary citizenship. Every reaction she had to the revelations, every question she asked, every choice she made was being evaluated as an indicator of our species' readiness for transformation. The beings guided her to a chamber where human consciousness could interface directly with their planetary network. The experience was overwhelming, touching the edges of collective intelligence that spanned millions of years of accumulated wisdom. For brief moments, she could perceive reality from the perspective of beings who thought in geological timescales, who had watched stars form and die, who understood the intricate relationships that maintained planetary stability across cosmic time. The experience showed her humanity's potential, not as conquerors of nature, but as conscious participants in planetary evolution. She saw possible futures where human creativity enhanced the Concordate's problem-solving capabilities, where our short lifespans provided fresh perspectives on challenges that ancient wisdom had approached the same way for millennia, where our emotional intensity brought new dimensions to collective consciousness that had achieved stability at the cost of dynamism. But she also felt the weight of responsibility that came with such partnership. Every human action would need to be evaluated for its impact on planetary harmony. Individual desires would need to be balanced against collective welfare across time scales that challenged human comprehension. The freedom to make mistakes that characterized human learning would need to be tempered by wisdom that prevented catastrophic errors. The chamber resonated with harmonics that conveyed the essence of the choice facing humanity. Remain isolated and face the same fate as previous surface civilizations, or accept transformation that would preserve our essential nature while expanding our consciousness to planetary scales. The decision couldn't be made by individuals, no matter how wise or well-intentioned. It required collective choice by a species willing to evolve beyond its origins. As Dr. Blackwood prepared to ascend back toward the surface, carrying with her revelations that could change the course of human history, she understood that her journey was just beginning. The real exploration would happen in human consciousness as our species grappled with the implications of learning that we were not alone, not dominant, and not as advanced as we had believed. The discoveries waiting in Earth's interior would pale beside the discoveries we would need to make within ourselves to become worthy partners in planetary stewardship. The ascent through passages that defied every law of physics she had learned began her transition back to a world that would never look the same again. Behind her, the harmonics of ancient civilizations carried messages of hope and concern for a young species standing at the threshold of transformation. Ahead of her lay the challenge of communicating revelations that human language had never been designed to express, of preparing humanity for choices that would echo through geological time. The elevator that carried her toward the surface rose through layers of rock that contained more mysteries than all of human science had yet discovered. Each mile of ascent brought her closer to a world that existed in ignorance of the vast intelligences that maintained its stability, that had no idea it was being watched, guided, and evaluated by minds that had learned to think on planetary scales. The surface seemed impossibly distant as Dr. Blackwood continued her ascent. her mind struggling to process revelations that challenged the very foundation of human understanding. Each meter upward felt like traveling between worlds, leaving behind chambers where consciousness itself had been redefined and returning to a reality that suddenly seemed narrow, limited, almost primitive in its assumptions about life and intelligence. Her equipment registered the gradual return to familiar physics. The breathable atmosphere that had sustained her at impossible depths gave way to the harsh realities of pressure and temperature that should have existed at these levels. The harmonic communications that had resonated directly within her consciousness faded to silence, replaced by the mechanical clicking of her radio attempting to re-establish contact with the surface team. But the silence wasn't empty. Even as the direct connection to the planetary network diminished, Dr. Blackwood could feel echoes of that vast intelligence lingering at the edges of her awareness. It was as if touching the Concordate's collective consciousness had permanently altered her neural patterns, creating pathways that remained sensitive to frequencies beyond normal human perception. She found herself aware of subtle vibrations in the rock around her, patterns that suggested communication flowing through channels she was only beginning to understand. The implications of this change terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. If brief contact with underground consciousness could permanently alter human neural architecture, what did that mean for the future of human concordate relations? Were these alterations intentional, a kind of biological preparation for deeper integration? Or were they unavoidable consequences of exposure to forms of consciousness that operated on fundamentally different principles? As she rose through the layers of Earth's crust, Dr. Blackwood began to understand that her return to the surface would mark the beginning of humanity's most challenging period of adaptation. The knowledge she carried couldn't remain secret. The implications were too vast, the potential consequences of ignorance too catastrophic. Yet revealing the existence of the underground civilizations would trigger social, political, and religious upheavals that could tear human society apart just when unity was most crucial for our survival. The radio crackled to life with increasingly frantic calls from her surface team. Dr. Martinez, her project coordinator, had been attempting contact for hours according to surface time, though Dr. Blackwood's chronometer showed only minutes had passed since her last transmission. The time dilation effects she had experienced in the deepest chambers were apparently lingering, creating discrepancies that would be impossible to explain through conventional physics. Control to Blackwood. Please respond immediately. We're showing seismic anomalies throughout the region. Your life signs disappeared from our monitors 6 hours ago. What's your status? Dr. Blackwood hesitated before responding. How could she explain that she had been communicating with civilizations that had existed for millions of years? That the seismic anomalies were probably the underground network adjusting to accommodate her presence? That her life signs had disappeared because she had been breathing atmosphere that didn't exist on Earth's surface? Blackwood to Control. I'm ascending normally. Equipment experienced some interference at depth, but all systems are functional now. Estimate surface arrival in 40 minutes. The response came immediately, Dr. Martinez's relief evident even through the static. Copy that, Blackwood. Medical team is standing by. We've had some unusual readings that we'll need to discuss during debrief. Unusual readings. Dr. Blackwood almost laughed at the understatement. Her entire physiology had been altered by exposure to atmospheric conditions that shouldn't exist. Her brain had been rewired by direct contact with planetary consciousness. Her understanding of reality had been fundamentally transformed by revelations that would challenge every assumption human civilization had made about its place in the universe. The ascent continued through passages that seemed to shift subtly as she passed, as if the rock itself was adjusting to facilitate her journey. She began to suspect that the underground civilizations were actively assisting her return, perhaps ensuring that she reached the surface with her discoveries intact, rather than risking equipment failures that could silence her permanently. The thought that beings with such advanced capabilities were invested in her successful return suggested that her mission had implications far beyond scientific curiosity. At 15,000 feet below surface level, her equipment began detecting familiar geological formations. The exotic atmospheric conditions gave way to the crushing pressures and extreme temperatures that human technology expected at these depths. Yet her suit continued to function perfectly. Its systems somehow adapted to conditions they had never been designed to handle. She suspected that her underground guides had made subtle modifications to her equipment, enhancements that would allow her to survive the transition between their world and the surface. The modifications weren't limited to her equipment. Dr. Blackwood could feel changes in her own physiology that went beyond the neural alterations she had already noticed. Her cardiovascular system seemed to be operating more efficiently, processing oxygen at levels that should have been impossible in the thin atmosphere of the deep passages. Her visual perception had expanded to include frequencies that allowed her to navigate in near-total darkness. Her hearing had become sensitive to subsonic vibrations that carried information about structural stability and geological conditions. These enhancements weren't temporary adaptations to unusual conditions. They felt permanent, as if her brief exposure to underground civilizations had triggered evolutionary changes that normally required millions of years to develop. The beings she had encountered possessed the ability to accelerate biological adaptation, to guide consciousness and physiology toward optimal configurations for specific environments. The implications were staggering. If they could enhance human capabilities so dramatically with brief contact, what could extended cooperation achieve? The underground civilizations weren't just offering knowledge and technology, they were offering the possibility of human evolution itself, guided development that could allow our species to thrive in environments we had never imagined accessible. But evolution came with costs. The changes Dr. Blackwood was experiencing made her increasingly sensitive to the crude vibrations of human technology, the chaotic electromagnetic signatures of surface civilization. The harmonious resonances of the underground world had spoiled her for the discordant noise of the surface. She was becoming something that existed between worlds, no longer fully human, but not yet adapted to the deeper realms of planetary consciousness. At 10,000 feet below surface, her radio picked up increasingly clear communications from the surface team. The conversations revealed mounting concern about the seismic activity that had accompanied her descent. Monitoring stations across the region had detected acoustic patterns that resembled communication signals, vibrations that followed mathematical progressions too complex to be natural phenomena. The scientific community was already beginning to ask questions that could lead to discoveries her underground contacts might not be prepared to handle. Dr. Blackwood realized that her expedition had already triggered a cascade of consequences that extended beyond her personal discoveries. The underground civilization's decision to reveal themselves to her had created ripple effects that were propagating through human scientific networks. Other researchers would investigate the anomalous readings. Deep drilling projects would be initiated to explore the sources of the unusual acoustic signatures. The age of hidden coexistence was ending, replaced by a period of inevitable contact that neither species might be fully prepared for. The responsibility of managing this transition weighed heavily on her consciousness. She carried not just knowledge, but the burden of deciding how to introduce revelations that could fundamentally alter human civilization's trajectory. The wrong approach could trigger panic, social collapse, or aggressive responses that would force the underground civilizations to protect themselves through methods that could devastate surface populations. Yet delay carried equal risks. The probability matrices she had witnessed in the deep chambers showed multiple scenarios where gradual revelation led to better outcomes than sudden disclosure, but they also showed timelines where hesitation allowed current destructive trends to progress beyond the point where intervention could prevent civilizational collapse. At 5,000 feet below surface, the familiar weight of normal gravity began to assert itself. The exotic physics of the deep chambers gave way to the conventional laws that governed surface reality. Dr. Blackwood felt the transition as a kind of sensory deprivation, losing access to information streams and perceptual channels that had briefly expanded her awareness beyond anything she had previously imagined possible. The loss was profound, like suddenly going blind after experiencing perfect vision. The underground civilizations existed in a reality enriched by dimensions of perception that surface life couldn't access. They perceived time as a navigable dimension rather than a linear progression. They experienced consciousness as a shared resource rather than an individual possession. They understood matter and energy as expressions of information patterns that could be modified through focused intention. Returning to surface consciousness felt like imprisonment within the narrow confines of individual awareness, trapped within the limitations of biological neural networks operating in isolation from the planetary intelligence that connected all underground life. Dr. Blackwood began to understand why the beings she had encountered viewed surface existence with a mixture of sympathy and concern. From their perspective, humans were living in self-imposed sensory deprivation, cut off from the rich information flows that connected all consciousness on deeper levels. The elevator shaft that would carry her through the final miles to the surface came into view, its mechanical structure seeming crude and primitive compared to the living architecture she had witnessed below. Yet it represented humanity's greatest achievement in deep Earth exploration, the culmination of decades of engineering development that had barely scratched the surface of what lay beneath. As she prepared to enter the elevator that would complete her journey to the surface, Dr. Blackwood paused to look back at the passages that extended into depths no human had previously reached. The darkness that had once seemed impenetrable now appeared filled with subtle illumination. Bioluminescent organisms and crystalline formations creating a gentle glow that guided travelers through the network of chambers and corridors that connected underground civilizations across the planet. She understood that she was leaving behind more than just a location. She was transitioning between states of consciousness, returning from expanded awareness to the limited perceptions that characterize surface existence. The knowledge she carried would need to be translated into concepts that could be communicated through human language and understood by minds that had never experienced direct contact with planetary intelligence. The elevator began its ascent through the final miles to the surface, each meter taking her further from the revelations that had redefined her understanding of life, consciousness, and humanity's place in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than anything surface science had discovered. Behind her, harmonic communications carried messages between civilizations that spanned geological time, coordinating responses to the unprecedented decision to make contact with the young species that inhabited the bright realm above. Ahead lay the challenge of preparing humanity for transformation, of guiding a species through evolutionary changes that would either elevate us to partnership with planetary intelligence or accelerate our journey toward the same extinction that had claimed previous surface civilizations. The elevator rose through darkness toward light, carrying with it the seeds of changes that would reshape human understanding of reality itself. The surface awaited, unchanged by the revelations that existed mere miles beneath its familiar landscapes. Unaware that every step taken on solid ground occurred above civilizations whose knowledge and capabilities dwarfed humanity's greatest achievements. Dr. Blackwood ascended toward a world that would never look the same, carrying knowledge that could either save our species or accelerate its destruction, depending on choices that had yet to be made by minds that had yet to grasp the true scope of the decisions that lay ahead. In the deepest chambers she was leaving behind, ancient intelligences continued their eternal vigil, maintaining planetary stability while watching to see whether the youngest surface species would prove capable of the wisdom necessary for survival. The test was just beginning, and the stakes could not have been higher for a species standing at the threshold of either transcendence or extinction. The elevator broke through into the surface facility, with a mechanical grinding that sounded alien after the harmonious resonances of the deep chambers. Dr. Blackwood emerged into sterile fluorescent lighting that seemed harsh and artificial compared to the living illumination she had witnessed miles below. The facility buzzed with activity as technicians monitored seismic readings that painted patterns across their screens in frequencies that told only fragments of the story unfolding beneath their feet. Dr. Martinez rushed to greet her, his face etched with concern and barely contained excitement. "Elena, thank God you're safe. We've been tracking acoustic signatures unlike anything in our databases. The patterns suggest structured communications extending across hundreds of miles of underground networks. What did you find down there?" Dr. Blackwood hesitated, feeling the weight of revelations that could reshape human understanding of reality itself. How could she explain that the acoustic signatures were conversations between civilizations that had existed longer than human history? That the networks extended not just across hundreds of miles, but across continents, connecting intelligences that had been observing humanity's development since before our species learned to control fire? "The geological structures are more complex than our models predicted," she said carefully, aware that every word would be analyzed, recorded, and disseminated to scientific communities around the world. "There are chambers at depths that shouldn't be able to maintain structural integrity, atmospheric conditions that don't match our understanding of deep Earth physics." The medical team surrounded her, running scans that revealed the physiological changes she could already feel transforming her body. Her cardiovascular efficiency had improved by 30%. Her neural activity showed patterns that didn't match baseline human brain function. Her cellular structure had adapted to process atmospheric compositions that didn't exist on Earth's surface. The modifications were so profound that she barely registered as the same species she had been before her descent. Dr. Patricia Wong, the facility's chief medical officer, stared at the readouts with growing amazement and concern. "Elena, these changes are impossible. Your body has adapted to environmental conditions that would kill a normal human being within minutes. Your brain is processing information at frequencies that our equipment can barely detect. What happened to you down there?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything human science understood about biology, evolution, and the limits of adaptation. Dr. Blackwood could feel the enhanced perceptions that had been awakened by her contact with underground consciousness. Awareness of information flows and communication channels that existed beyond normal human detection. The surface facility felt cramped and limiting, like a box constraining consciousness that had briefly experienced the freedom of planetary awareness. "I made contact," she said simply, knowing that the words would trigger investigations that could lead to discoveries the underground civilizations might not be prepared to handle. "There are forms of life at those depths that challenge our understanding of what's possible. They've been there far longer than we've been on the surface." The room fell silent as the implications of her statement sank in. Contact with unknown life forms would trigger protocols that extended from scientific institutions to government agencies to military organizations. The discovery would cascade through human civilization with consequences that could range from revolutionary advancement to catastrophic disruption. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper despite the secure nature of the facility. "Are you saying there are living organisms at depths of over 20 miles? That's beyond anything our models predict could survive." "Not just surviving," Dr. Blackwood replied, feeling the weight of knowledge that pressed against her consciousness like a physical presence. "Thriving. They've developed technologies that make our greatest achievements look primitive. They've created societies that have maintained stability for millions of years, and they've been aware of our existence since the beginning of human civilization." The medical monitors attached to her body began registering elevated stress responses from the team around her. Heart rates accelerating, breathing patterns becoming irregular, electromagnetic signatures that suggested the kind of cognitive dissonance that occurred when fundamental assumptions about reality were challenged. She was witnessing the first human responses to revelations that would soon spread beyond this facility to reshape human understanding of our place in the universe. Dr. Wong's hands shook as she reviewed the biological scans. Elena, the cellular modifications you're exhibiting would require millions of years of evolutionary development. They're not adaptations to environmental stress. They're fundamental redesigns of human physiology. It's as if something has rewritten your genetic code to optimize your body for conditions that don't exist on Earth's surface. The truth was both simpler and more complex than Dr. Wong could imagine. The underground beings possess the ability to guide biological development, to accelerate evolutionary processes that normally required geological timescales. But the enhancements weren't imposed from outside. They were awakened from within, activating potential that had always existed in human DNA but had remained dormant due to surface environmental conditions. Dr. Blackwood realized that humanity's genetic code contained information that predated our species' emergence on the surface. The underground civilizations had been subtly influencing terrestrial evolution for millions of years, seeding genetic potential that could be activated when contact became necessary. Every human being carried dormant capabilities that could be awakened by exposure to the consciousness fields that permeated the deep Earth networks. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just discovering that we weren't alone on Earth. We were discovering that our own evolution had been guided by intelligences that had been preparing us for eventual contact. The surface world had served as a kind of nursery where human consciousness could develop the creativity and adaptability that would make us valuable partners in planetary stewardship. "We need to notify the appropriate authorities," Dr. Martinez said, his voice carrying the weight of protocols that would transform a scientific discovery into a matter of planetary security. This kind of discovery has implications that extend far beyond our research mandate. Dr. Blackwood understood that her revelations had already set in motion a cascade of events that would reshape human civilization. Government agencies would demand access to the underground passages. Military organizations would evaluate potential threats and opportunities. Religious institutions would grapple with theological implications that challenged fundamental assumptions about human uniqueness and divine creation. But most importantly, the discovery would trigger humanity's first conscious attempt to communicate with intelligences that had been observing us throughout our entire evolutionary history. The underground civilizations had revealed themselves to her as a test, evaluating whether our species was ready for contact that could either elevate us to planetary citizenship or accelerate our destruction. The seismic monitoring equipment throughout the facility began registering new patterns of activity. Deep Earth vibrations that followed mathematical progressions, acoustic signatures that resembled complex linguistic structures, rhythmic pulses that suggested coordinated communication across vast networks. The underground civilizations were responding to her return to the surface, possibly coordinating their approach to the next phase of contact. Dr. Blackwood felt the enhanced perceptions awakened by her underground experience, resonating with the signals flowing through the monitoring equipment. The patterns weren't random geological activity, they were messages. Communications flowing between underground chambers as ancient intelligences debated how to proceed with a surface species that was now aware of their existence. The probability matrices she had witnessed in the deep chambers had shown multiple potential futures branching from this moment. Some paths led to gradual integration, where humanity learned to balance technological advancement with sustainable development, guided by wisdom accumulated over millions of years of planetary stewardship. Other paths showed catastrophic outcomes, where human fear and aggression triggered defensive responses that could devastate surface civilization. The choice wasn't just hers to make, but her actions in the next few hours would influence which probability branch humanity would follow. Every word she spoke to government officials, every detail she revealed to scientific colleagues, every decision she made about disclosure would ripple through human consciousness and affect our species' ultimate fate. The facility's communication systems began receiving reports from monitoring stations around the world. Similar acoustic anomalies were being detected in deep mining operations, abandoned boreholes, and natural cave systems across 6 continents. The underground network was becoming active on a global scale, possibly preparing for coordinated contact that would make concealment impossible. Dr. Blackwood realized that her descent into the deep chambers had been more than an individual exploration. It had been humanity's formal introduction to intelligences that had been waiting for our species to develop the technological capability and wisdom necessary for meaningful contact. The underground civilizations had been patient observers for millions of years, but humanity's rapid technological advancement had accelerated their timeline for direct engagement. The medical scans continued to reveal the extent of her physiological transformation. Her nervous system had developed new pathways that could process information at frequencies beyond normal human capability. Her endocrine system had been modified to produce compounds that didn't exist in surface human biochemistry. Her immune system had been enhanced to resist environmental stresses that would be lethal to unmodified humans. But the most profound changes were occurring in her consciousness itself. The brief contact with planetary intelligence had awakened awareness of information dimensions that existed beyond individual perception. She could sense the emotional states of the people around her, feel the electromagnetic signatures of their thoughts and concerns, perceive the subtle vibrations that carried meaning through channels that human science had never detected. These enhancements weren't gifts from alien intelligences. They were the activation of capabilities that had always existed within human potential. The underground civilizations had simply provided the environmental conditions necessary to awaken dormant neural pathways, to activate genetic sequences that had been waiting for the right combination of consciousness and circumstance to express themselves. Dr. Wong's medical analysis revealed that the changes were spreading beyond Dr. Blackwood's individual physiology. Her enhanced electromagnetic signature was beginning to influence the neural patterns of people who spent extended time in her presence. The facility's staff were showing subtle modifications to their brainwave patterns, improvements to their cognitive processing capabilities, increased frequencies sensitivity to information that normal human consciousness couldn't detect. The phenomenon suggested that contact with underground consciousness was contagious in the most positive sense. Exposure to enhanced awareness awakened similar capabilities in other humans, creating a cascade effect that could gradually transform human consciousness on a species-wide scale. The underground civilizations had designed their contact protocol to initiate evolutionary changes that would spread naturally through human populations. But the transformation came with challenges that human society wasn't prepared to handle. Enhanced individuals would perceive reality in ways that conflicted with conventional understanding of physics, biology, and consciousness. They would be sensitive to information flows and communication channels that existed beyond normal detection. They would experience emotional and intuitive connections that challenged assumptions about individual identity and personal boundaries. Dr. Blackwood understood that she was becoming the first of a new kind of human, a bridge between surface consciousness and the planetary intelligence that connected all underground life. The role carried responsibilities that extended beyond scientific discovery to encompass the guidance of humanity through evolutionary changes that could either unite our species with planetary wisdom or fragment us into incompatible forms of consciousness. The facility's monitoring equipment detected new patterns of seismic activity that seemed to respond to her presence. The underground networks were adjusting their communication frequencies to accommodate her enhanced perceptual capabilities, possibly preparing to establish direct contact with surface facilities through her modified consciousness. She was becoming a living communication interface between worlds that had remained separate for millions of years. As government officials began arriving at the facility, Dr. Blackwood realized that humanity's relationship with the hidden civilizations beneath our feet was about to enter a new phase. The age of secret observation was ending, replaced by a period of direct contact that would challenge every assumption human civilization had made about our place in the universe. The choices made in the coming days would determine whether humanity would join the community of planetary intelligences as partners in maintaining Earth's stability, or continue on the path of resource depletion and environmental destruction that had led previous surface civilizations to extinction. The underground beings had revealed themselves because humanity stood at a crossroads where guidance was necessary for survival, but correctly would need the wisdom to choose to come from within human consciousness itself. Dr. Blackwood stood at the center of a transformation that would reshape human understanding of life, intelligence, and our relationship with the planet that had nurtured our species into existence. The surface world continued its familiar routines above civilizations whose knowledge could solve every challenge humanity faced. But accessing that wisdom would require fundamental changes to our approach to existence itself. The greatest discovery in human history was just beginning, and its implications would echo through every aspect of human civilization for generations to come. In chambers miles beneath the surface, ancient intelligences watched and waited to see whether the youngest surface species would prove worthy of the knowledge that could either elevate us to unprecedented heights wisdom and capability of, or accelerate our journey toward the same silence that had claimed our predecessors. The future hung in the balance between worlds, waiting for choices that would determine whether humanity would learn to think like a planetary species or remain trapped within the limitations that had doomed every previous attempt at surface civilization. The test continued, and the stakes had never been higher for a species standing at the threshold of either transformation or extinction. The corridors of the Pentagon's deepest levels hummed with an urgency that hadn't been felt since the Cold War's darkest hours. Admiral Sarah Chen strode through security checkpoints that few knew existed, her clearance granting access to briefing rooms buried so far beneath Washington that no satellite could penetrate their secrets. The folder in her hands contained Dr. Blackwood's preliminary report, sanitized for military consumption, but still explosive enough to redefine national security doctrine. "Gentlemen, ladies," she addressed the assembled officials, representatives from agencies whose very names were classified. "What you're about to hear will challenge everything we thought we knew about planetary defense." She activated a holographic display showing seismic readings from the past 72 hours. The patterns were unmistakable to anyone trained in signal intelligence. Organized communications flowing through networks that spanned continents. General Martinez, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward as the implications became clear. "Are you telling us there's a communication system beneath our feet that we never detected? How is that possible with our current monitoring capabilities?" Admiral Chen's response carried the weight of revelations that would reshape military strategy across the globe. "Not just undetected, General, deliberately concealed. These signals operate on frequencies that our equipment wasn't designed to recognize because we never imagined anything could survive at those depths, let alone develop technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive." The briefing room fell silent as career military officers grappled with the possibility that every assumption about terrestrial security had been fundamentally flawed. Underground networks with global reach, intelligence capabilities that had been observing surface military operations for decades, technologies that could potentially neutralize any surface-based defense system. Colonel Patricia Wong, Director of Strategic Intelligence, studied the seismic data with growing concern. If these readings are accurate, they've been watching our nuclear tests, tracking our submarine movements, monitoring our satellite deployments. They know everything about our capabilities while remaining completely invisible to our surveillance. The implications extended beyond military intelligence to encompass questions of sovereignty and territorial control that challenged the very foundation of international law. If Earth's interior harbored civilizations with technologies that surpassed surface capabilities, what did that mean for national boundaries that existed only in 2 dimensions? How could surface governments maintain authority over territories that extended into domains controlled by intelligences they had never acknowledged? Dr. Blackwood's biological modifications had been classified at levels that restricted access to fewer than 30 individuals worldwide. The medical data revealed capabilities that could revolutionize human performance in ways that would transform military operations. Enhanced sensory perception, accelerated cognitive processing, physiological adaptations that could allow soldiers to operate in environments previously considered lethal. But the enhancements came with complications. that military planners found deeply unsettling. Individuals exposed to underground consciousness demonstrated reduced aggression, increased empathy, and cognitive patterns that prioritized long-term consequences over short-term tactical advantages. From a strategic perspective, these changes could compromise the psychological foundations that made effective military operations possible. Admiral Chen continued her briefing with information that would be distributed only to the highest levels of government. The entity we've designated as Contact 1 has demonstrated the ability to modify human physiology at the cellular level. The implications for biological warfare, enhanced soldier programs, and medical applications are unprecedented. But the modifications appear to come with psychological changes that could affect loyalty, aggression, and willingness to engage in combat operations. The room buzzed with whispered conversations as officers considered scenarios that had never appeared in any war college curriculum. How do you plan military operations against adversaries who can modify your personnel at the biological level? How do you maintain unit cohesion when some soldiers possess capabilities that others lack? How do you evaluate threats from intelligences whose technological capabilities remain largely unknown? General Martinez raised the question that hung unspoken in the air, like a weapon waiting to detonate. Are we looking at potential allies or enemies? The acoustic signatures suggest coordinated activity across multiple continents. If these entities decided to take hostile action, what would be our defensive capabilities? The question revealed the fundamental challenge facing military leadership worldwide. Every defense strategy, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine had been developed for surface-based conflicts. The possibility of threats emerging from Earth's interior had never been seriously considered because such threats had been assumed impossible. Admiral Chen's response carried the weight of assessments that had kept Pentagon analysts working around the clock since Dr. Blackwood's return. Current evaluation suggests capabilities that exceed our ability to counter through conventional means. They've demonstrated mastery of acoustic technologies that could potentially trigger seismic events, atmospheric modifications that could affect weather patterns, and biological enhancement techniques that could transform human physiology. The briefing room's atmosphere grew heavy with the realization that humanity's military supremacy existed only on Earth's surface. The vast three-dimensional domain beneath their feet harbored intelligences whose capabilities rendered surface-based defense systems potentially obsolete. Nuclear weapons, satellite networks, aircraft carriers, all the instruments of modern military power, operated within a narrow band of Earth's total volume. Colonel Wong studied intelligence reports that painted a picture of coordinated underground activity spanning the globe. We're detecting similar acoustic patterns beneath military installations in Russia, China, and NATO countries. This suggests either a single coordinated intelligence or multiple entities working in cooperation. Either scenario presents challenges we're not equipped to handle. The implications for intelligence gathering were equally disturbing. If underground civilizations had been observing surface activities for extended periods, they possessed information about military capabilities, strategic plans, and classified technologies that could compromise every aspect of national security. Decades of secret weapons development, covert operations, and strategic planning had potentially been conducted under the observation of intelligences whose existence had never been suspected. Dr. Blackwood's report included references to probability matrices that modeled potential futures based on human behavior patterns. The underground entities had been analyzing surface civilization with the same thoroughness that human intelligence agencies applied to foreign governments. They understood political structures, economic systems, social dynamics, and military capabilities with accuracy that exceeded the best human intelligence assessments. The briefing continued with technical analysis that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. The underground civilizations had apparently mastered technologies that allowed them to manipulate matter at the molecular level, create sustainable energy systems that produced no detectable emissions, and establish communication networks that operated faster than light through mechanisms that human science couldn't explain. Admiral Chen displayed reconnaissance data that had been gathered through deep drilling projects conducted under military oversight. We've confirmed the existence of artificial structures at depths previously considered inaccessible. The engineering involved exceeds anything in our current capabilities. These aren't crude underground shelters. They're sophisticated cities with populations that could number in the millions. The population estimates were perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all. If Earth's interior housed multiple civilizations with populations comparable to major surface cities, the total number of intelligent beings on the planet could be orders of magnitude larger than human census data suggested. Humanity, which had considered itself the dominant planetary species, might represent a small minority of Earth's total intelligent population. General Martinez requested projections for various contact scenarios, from peaceful cooperation to active hostility. The military's responsibility was to prepare for possibilities that ranged from unprecedented alliance to existential threat. But the analysis revealed gaps in human understanding that made meaningful preparation nearly impossible. "We're essentially planning blind," admitted Colonel Wong. "We don't understand their technologies, their social structures, their decision-making processes, or their ultimate objectives regarding surface civilization. Every scenario we model is based on assumptions that could be completely wrong." The underground entities had demonstrated capabilities that suggested they could influence surface events without direct confrontation. Weather modification technologies that could trigger droughts or floods, seismic manipulation that could cause earthquakes in strategically important locations, biological agents that could enhance or modify human populations. The possibilities for indirect influence were virtually limitless. But perhaps most concerning was the evidence suggesting that contact had already been occurring at levels below official recognition. Reports from deep mining operations, underwater exploration missions, and geological surveys contained anomalies that, when viewed collectively, suggested ongoing interaction between surface personnel and underground entities. The contact might not be beginning, it might be expanding from covert to official acknowledgement. Admiral Chen concluded her briefing with recommendations that would reshape defense spending priorities for decades to come. We need to develop capabilities for three-dimensional planetary defense. Our current systems operate primarily on Earth's surface and in near space. We're essentially undefended against threats that could emerge from the 99% of Earth's volume that exists below ground. The recommendations included research programs that would attempt to reverse engineer technologies observed during underground contact, development of detection systems capable of monitoring deep Earth networks, and enhancement programs designed to provide surface personnel with capabilities comparable to those demonstrated by Dr. Blackwood. But the most significant recommendation involved a fundamental shift in strategic thinking from planetary conquest to planetary partnership. The underground civilizations had demonstrated capabilities that made military confrontation potentially suicidal for surface civilization. The only viable long-term strategy might be cooperation with intelligences whose technological advancement exceeded human capabilities by millions of years. The briefing ended with orders that would cascade through military and intelligence organizations worldwide. Deep Earth monitoring systems would be established at strategic locations. Research programs would investigate technologies that could operate at previously impossible depths. Personnel would be trained for operations in environments that had never been considered accessible to human presence. But underlying all these preparations was the recognition that humanity's military and intelligence communities were grappling with challenges that exceeded their institutional capabilities. The discovery of underground civilizations represented more than a change in threat assessment. It represented a fundamental alteration in humanity's understanding of its place, in a universe far more complex and populated than anyone had imagined. In secure facilities around the world, similar briefings were occurring as governments struggled to adapt to revelations that challenged the foundation of international relations. The age of surface-only politics was ending. replaced by the need to consider planetary relationships that extended into dimensions no diplomat had ever been trained to navigate. The military implications were staggering, but they paled beside the broader questions of how human civilization would adapt to the knowledge that it shared Earth with intelligences whose capabilities and wisdom exceeded anything surface culture had achieved. The underground entities had revealed themselves at a time when humanity faced challenges that threatened our long-term survival, suggesting that contact wasn't coincidental but carefully timed intervention. As Admiral Chen left the briefing room, she carried with her the weight of knowledge that would reshape military doctrine for generations to come. The Pentagon's deepest levels buzzed with activity as analysts, strategists, and planners grappled with scenarios that had never appeared in any military manual. Earth's interior had become the ultimate strategic frontier, and humanity was just beginning to understand how unprepared it was for the challenges that lay ahead in the darkness below. The surface world continued its familiar patterns above civilizations whose existence challenged every assumption about planetary defense, territorial sovereignty, and human dominance. In the depths below, ancient intelligences watched and evaluated humanity's response to revelations that would determine whether our species would learn to think beyond surface concerns or remain trapped within limitations that had constrained every previous attempt at planetary civilization. The test continued at levels that extended from individual consciousness to military strategy, from diplomatic protocol to species-wide survival. Every choice made in the coming months would influence whether humanity would earn its place in a planetary community that had been maintaining Earth's stability for millions of years, or continue on trajectories that had led previous civilizations to silence and extinction. The Vatican's Apostolic Archive, buried 4 levels beneath St. Peter's Basilica, houses documents that span 2 millennia of carefully guarded secrets. Cardinal Alessandro Toretti descended the marble steps with measured precision, his footsteps echoing through corridors where silence had become sacred. The parchment he carried bore seals that hadn't been broken in 800 years, its contents so sensitive that only 12 men in history had been granted access to its revelations. Tonight, that number would become 13. The document, catalogued simply as Testimonium Profundum, contained the testimony of Brother Marcus Antonius, a Benedictine monk whose 12th century expedition into the catacombs beneath Rome had uncovered evidence that challenged the very foundation of human understanding. His account, written in Latin so archaic that only the Vatican's most skilled linguists could decipher its meaning, spoke of encounters that the Church had deemed too dangerous for public knowledge. Cardinal Toretti activated the archive's most secure chamber, where environmental controls maintained conditions that had preserved documents since the fall of Constantinople. The testimonium's pages, crafted from vellum that predated the printing press, contained illustrations that defied medieval artistic conventions. Detailed anatomical drawings of beings that possessed human intelligence but had evolved for life in absolute darkness. Architectural sketches of structures that showed engineering principles not rediscovered until the Renaissance. Maps of underground networks that extended beneath the foundations of Rome itself. Brother Marcus's expedition had been commissioned by Pope Alexander III to investigate reports of voices emanating from sealed sections of the early Christian catacombs. What he discovered challenged not just church doctrine, but the fundamental assumptions of human dominance that underpinned medieval cosmology. The catacombs, originally excavated to bury Christian martyrs, connected to far older passages that showed evidence of intelligent modification dating back millennia before Christ's birth. The monk's account described chambers where the walls bore symbols that resembled no known language, yet conveyed meaning through patterns that seemed to resonate directly within human consciousness. He wrote of encountering beings whose physical forms had adapted to perpetual darkness, their elongated limbs and enhanced sensory organs marking millions of years of evolution in environments that would kill surface dwellers within moments. But most disturbing to medieval sensibilities was the evidence that these underground inhabitants possessed knowledge of Christian doctrine before Christianity had been established. Their carved chambers contained symbols that paralleled Christian iconography, suggesting either divine revelation that preceded Christ's ministry or contact with surface civilizations that the Church's historical records had never acknowledged. Cardinal Toretti studied the Testimonium's most controversial passages, written in cipher that had taken Vatican scholars centuries to decode. Brother Marcus described underground libraries containing texts that appeared to be written in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, but using grammatical structures that predated classical antiquity. The content of these texts, as far as the monk could comprehend, dealt with the management of planetary systems, the guidance of surface civilizations, and theological concepts that wouldn't emerge in Christian thought until the medieval scholastic period. The implications had terrified church leadership in the 12th century and continued to challenge Vatican scholars in the modern era. If underground civilizations possessed advanced theological knowledge, what did that mean for claims of divine revelation? If they had been observing and possibly influencing surface religious development for millennia, how did that affect the uniqueness of Christian doctrine? Brother Marcus's final entries, written after his return to the surface, revealed psychological changes that paralleled those documented in Dr. Blackwood's medical reports 8 centuries later. Enhanced perception that allowed him to sense emotional states in other humans. Expanded cognitive capabilities that enabled him to grasp theological concepts that had previously been beyond his understanding. Physiological modifications that improved his health and extended his lifespan far beyond medieval norms. The monk lived to the unprecedented age of 97, spending his final decades writing theological treatises that were deemed so advanced they were immediately classified by church authorities. His ideas about the relationship between divine consciousness and planetary intelligence, the role of multiple forms of life in God's creation, and the possibility of revelation occurring through non-human channels were considered dangerous to established doctrine. Cardinal Toretti understood that Brother Marcus's testimony represented only one document among thousands that the Vatican had accumulated over centuries of covert investigation into phenomena that challenged official church teaching. The archive's deepest vaults contained reports from missionaries who had encountered similar underground civilizations in locations spanning the globe. Caves beneath Mount Athos, where Orthodox monks had discovered chambers filled with beings who possessed theological knowledge that exceeded seminary training. Passages beneath Tibetan monasteries, where Buddhist monks had made contact with entities whose understanding of consciousness transcended human philosophical achievement. The pattern was consistent across cultures and centuries. Underground civilizations with advanced knowledge of religious and philosophical concepts that surface societies had developed independently. The implications suggested either a common source of wisdom that predated all surface religions or ongoing influence from intelligences that had been guiding human spiritual development since the dawn of consciousness. The Vatican's response had been to classify these discoveries at levels that exceeded even papal access. The Church's public doctrine maintained human uniqueness in God's creation, but its private archives contained evidence of a universe populated by multiple forms of consciousness, each contributing to a cosmic order that exceeded any single religious tradition's understanding. Cardinal Toretti's current mission involved coordinating the Church's response to the revelations emerging from Dr. Blackwood's expedition. The acoustic signatures detected by military monitoring systems had been simultaneously recorded by seismic equipment installed beneath Vatican City. The patterns matched frequencies documented in Brother Marcus's testimonium, suggesting that the same underground networks that had been contacted by medieval monks were now revealing themselves to modern science. The theological implications were staggering. If God's creation included multiple forms of intelligent life, each evolved for different planetary environments, how did that affect doctrines of human salvation? If divine revelation had been occurring through various channels for millions of years, what was the unique role of Christianity in cosmic history? If underground civilizations possessed knowledge that could solve humanity's greatest challenges, was it humanity's responsibility to seek their guidance, These questions had been debated in secret by Vatican theologians for centuries, leading to the development of doctrines that were never officially promulgated but were understood by the Church's highest levels. The concept of revelatio universalis acknowledged that God's truth could manifest through any form of consciousness capable of receiving it. The principle of custodia planetaria recognized that stewardship of Earth might involve cooperation with non-human intelligences that possessed greater wisdom and longer temporal perspectives. Cardinal Toretti's access to these classified doctrines prepared him for revelations that would challenge the faith of believers who had never considered the possibility of multiple forms of intelligent life sharing God's creation. The Church's responsibility was to guide humanity through theological transformations that could either strengthen or shatter religious understanding, depending on how carefully the process was managed. The archive's communication systems began receiving reports from Catholic institutions worldwide. Monasteries built over ancient cave systems were detecting acoustic anomalies that matched patterns documented in the Vatican's classified files. Religious sites that had been considered sacred for millennia were revealing connections networks that suggest to underground their significance had been recognized by multiple forms of consciousness. The monastery of St. Catherine in Egypt, built over passages that extended into the Sinai Peninsula's interior, had detected harmonic patterns that resembled the Gregorian chant, but operated at frequencies that induced transcendent experiences in listeners. The Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel in France, constructed above tidal caves that connected to deeper networks, had recorded vocalizations that followed musical structures more complex than any human composition. Each report confirmed the global scope of underground civilizations and their apparent connection to humanity's spiritual development. Sites that had been considered holy by multiple religious traditions throughout history were revealing themselves to be access points to networks of consciousness that had been influencing human spiritual evolution for millennia. Cardinal Toretti understood that the Church faced a decision that would define its role in humanity's future relationship with planetary intelligence. The Vatican could maintain its traditional position of human uniqueness, potentially alienating believers who would eventually learn of underground civilizations through secular channels. Or it could embrace a more expansive theology that acknowledged God's creation as including multiple forms of consciousness, each contributing to divine purpose through their unique capabilities and perspectives. The decision carried implications that extended beyond Catholic doctrine to influence global religious understanding. The Vatican's position on extraterrestrial or subterranean intelligence would affect how billions of believers processed revelations that challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in creation. The theological framework was already being developed through documents that would only be released when circumstances required official acknowledgement of underground civilizations. Gaudium et Sapientia outlined the Church's position that divine wisdom could manifest through any form of consciousness capable of recognizing truth and beauty. Stewardship Universalis established principles for cooperation with non-human intelligences in maintaining the integrity of God's creation. These documents represented theological evolution that paralleled the biological evolution Dr. Blackwood was experiencing. Just as human physiology could be enhanced through contact with underground consciousness, human spiritual understanding could be expanded through acknowledgement of divine presence in forms of life that exceeded traditional religious categories. Cardinal Toretti's final task in the archive involved updating protocols for contact with underground civilizations that had been developed over centuries of covert interaction. The Church had maintained discrete relationships with various forms of non-human intelligence, receiving guidance on matters ranging from environmental stewardship to the resolution of theological controversies that threatened religious unity. These relationships had been conducted through intermediaries who possessed the enhanced capabilities necessary for communication with consciousness that operated on different perceptual frequencies. Monks and nuns who had been selected for their spiritual development, and trained in meditation techniques that allowed expanded awareness. Theologians who had studied in isolation for decades, developing cognitive abilities that could process concepts beyond normal human comprehension. The network of enhanced individuals represented the Church's most classified resource, a community of believers who served as bridges between human consciousness and the planetary intelligence that connected all underground life. Their existence had been hidden even from most church hierarchy, known only to cardinals who possessed the highest levels of clearance and spiritual development. But the revelations emerging from secular science were making concealment increasingly difficult. The enhanced capabilities that had previously been attributed to mystical experiences or divine grace were being documented through medical equipment that revealed the biological basis of expanded consciousness. The Church's secret network of enhanced individuals would soon need to be acknowledged or risk being exposed through scientific investigation. Cardinal Toretti sealed the testimonium back within its protective case, understanding that Brother Marcus's 800-year-old account was about to become relevant to contemporary theology in ways that would reshape religious understanding worldwide. The monk's encounters with underground consciousness had been dismissed as medieval mysticism, but modern science was confirming the physical reality of civilizations that possessed both technological capabilities and spiritual wisdom that exceeded human achievement. The Vatican's archives contained the most comprehensive collection of documentation regarding humanity's relationship with underground intelligence, accumulated through centuries of discrete contact that had influenced church doctrine in ways that believers had never suspected. The time was approaching when this hidden knowledge would need to be revealed to guide humanity through transformations that would either strengthen or shatter religious faith. In chapels around the world, prayers were being offered for guidance through challenges that exceeded any previous test of human spiritual resilience. The discovery of underground civilizations represented more than scientific revolution. It represented theological crisis that could either expand human understanding of divine creation or fragment religious communities that were unprepared for revelations about the true complexity of God's universe. Cardinal Toretti ascended from the archive's depths, carrying knowledge that connected medieval mysticism to modern science, ancient wisdom to contemporary crisis. Above him, St. Peter's Basilica rose toward heaven, its dome a symbol of humanity's aspiration to transcend earthly limitations. Below him, networks of consciousness extended through Earth's interior, connecting forms of intelligence that had been maintaining planetary harmony while surface civilization struggled with spiritual questions that underground wisdom had resolved eons ago. The greatest theological challenge in church history was beginning, and its resolution would determine whether human religious understanding could expand to encompass truths that existed beyond the surface of human experience. In the darkness below, ancient intelligences waited to see whether surface spirituality could evolve to embrace a universe far more sacred and complex than any human doctrine had ever imagined. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the abandoned subway tunnel beneath Manhattan, her modified consciousness detecting patterns that would have been invisible to unenhanced humans. The construction workers who had sealed this section in 1947 had left behind more than concrete barriers. They had left behind questions that resonated through frequency ranges her altered neural pathways could now perceive. The official record stated that the tunnel had been closed due to structural instability, but the electromagnetic signatures her enhanced senses detected told a different story. The concrete showed tool marks that suggested modification rather than abandonment. Passages had been deliberately obscured, not collapsed. Someone had wanted to hide what lay beyond the barriers, and they had succeeded for over 70 years. Her equipment registered atmospheric changes that defied conventional physics. The air pressure was increasing as she moved deeper into the sealed sections, but not in the crushing manner that would characterize normal underground environments. Instead, the atmosphere was becoming more breathable, as if someone had engineered optimal conditions for human survival at depths that should have been impossible to inhabit. The tunnel opened into a chamber that challenged every assumption about New York's underground infrastructure. The space was vast enough to house several city blocks, its ceiling disappearing into darkness that her enhanced vision could penetrate further than any human eye should have been capable of seeing. The walls showed evidence of construction techniques that predated the city's establishment, yet incorporated engineering principles that wouldn't be discovered until the modern era. Moving through this hidden space, Dr. Vasquez began to understand that Manhattan's underground network was far more complex than any municipal planning document had ever acknowledged. Passages branched in directions that would have extended beneath the East River, connecting to networks that could link every borough through routes that bypassed surface transportation entirely. But the most striking discovery was the evidence of recent habitation. The chambers weren't ancient ruins left abandoned by forgotten civilizations. They were active spaces, maintained by inhabitants who had been using New York's hidden infrastructure, while the city above remained completely unaware of their presence. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The underground civilizations weren't confined to remote locations like deep mining sites or unexplored cave systems. They had been living beneath humanity's greatest cities all along, using passages and chambers that connected urban centers across continents. Every major metropolitan area might harbor populations that had been thriving in complete secrecy, while surface dwellers went about their daily routines just meters above their heads. Her enhanced hearing detected sounds that confirmed this hypothesis. Rhythmic patterns that suggested machinery operating in distant chambers. Harmonic communications that indicated organized activity throughout the network. The acoustic signatures of a functioning civilization that had learned to exist in parallel with surface society, while remaining completely invisible to human detection. The implications were staggering. If underground populations existed beneath major cities, their numbers could dwarf official census data by orders of magnitude. New York alone might house more underground residents than surface dwellers, all living in spaces that municipal authorities had never mapped or acknowledged. The city's infrastructure, its power grids, water systems, and transportation networks might all be serving populations that official records claimed didn't exist. Dr. Vasquez's exploration revealed evidence of integration between surface and underground systems that suggested cooperation rather than simple coexistence. Power conduits that tapped into city electrical grids with modifications so subtle they would never be detected by routine maintenance. Water lines that diverted small percentages of flow to networks that served underground populations. Communication cables that carried additional data streams through frequencies that surface equipment wasn't designed to monitor. The underground residents weren't parasites drawing resources from surface civilization. They were partners, contributing to urban functionality in ways that enhanced rather than depleted city services. The electrical grid operated more efficiently than engineering models predicted because underground modifications optimized power distribution. The water system experienced fewer failures than comparable cities because underground maintenance prevented problems before they affected surface operations. New York's legendary resilience during natural disasters and infrastructure crises might have been partially due to assistance from populations that surface authorities never knew existed. Underground civilizations with capabilities that exceeded surface technology could have been quietly maintaining city systems, preventing failures that would have crippled urban operations, ensuring continuity of services during emergencies when surface resources were overwhelmed. The discovery transformed Dr. Vasquez's understanding of urban development itself. Cities might not have grown randomly through surface expansion and population pressure. Their locations, their layouts, their infrastructure patterns might all have been influenced by underground civilizations that had been guiding urban development to optimize integration between surface and subsurface populations. Manhattan's grid system, often praised for its logical efficiency, might have been designed to align with underground passages that required specific geometric relationships for optimal functionality. The positioning of major buildings, the routing of subway lines, the placement of parks and public spaces, all might have been subtly influenced by considerations that took underground populations into account. Her enhanced perception detected communication flows that connected the New York network to similar systems in other major cities. London's ancient underground system might connect to passages that predated Roman occupation. Tokyo's complex subway network might integrate with chambers that had been maintained since before recorded Japanese history. The world's great cities might all be nodes in a global network that underground civilizations had been developing for millennia. The realization that she was witnessing urban planning on a planetary scale overwhelmed her consciousness. Every major city might be part of a coordinated development project that had been ongoing for thousands of years. Surface populations had been unknowingly participating in the construction of a global infrastructure that served both visible and hidden civilizations. But the integration went beyond mere infrastructure sharing. Dr. Vasquez's enhanced awareness detected evidence that underground populations had been actively participating in surface society while maintaining their hidden identities. Individuals with subtle physiological modifications that allowed them to function in both surface and underground environments. People whose enhanced capabilities made them exceptionally effective in careers that required problem-solving skills that exceeded normal human parameters. The implications for human society were profound. Some of the individuals who had shaped modern civilization might have been representatives of underground populations working to guide surface development in directions that would benefit both communities. Scientists whose innovations seemed to come from nowhere. Engineers who designed systems with efficiency that exceeded their apparent expertise. Artists whose work contained concepts that seemed to transcend normal human experience. These individuals might have been bridges between worlds, using their enhanced capabilities to introduce underground knowledge into surface civilization gradually, ensuring that technological and cultural development proceeded at rates that wouldn't destabilize either community. The greatest achievements of human civilization might have been collaborative efforts between surface and underground intelligence. Dr. Vasquez realized that her own enhancement represented not the beginning of human contact with underground civilizations, but the official acknowledgement of relationships that had been developing for centuries. The underground populations had been gradually preparing surface humanity for direct contact by introducing enhanced individuals into positions where they could guide social, technological, and cultural evolution. The process had been so subtle that surface society had never suspected that some of its most influential members possessed capabilities that exceeded normal human parameters. The enhanced individuals had been carefully selected and trained to function within surface social structures, while maintaining their connections to underground networks that provided guidance and support for their activities. But the accelerating pace of technological development and environmental crisis had forced underground civilizations to abandon their gradual approach in favor of direct contact. Surface humanity was approaching critical thresholds too rapidly for indirect guidance to prevent potentially catastrophic outcomes. The time for hidden influence had passed, replaced by the need for open cooperation between surface and underground populations. Dr. Vasquez's exploration of New York's hidden infrastructure had revealed the extent of integration that already existed between surface and underground civilizations. The foundation for cooperation was already in place, maintained by populations that had been working together for centuries, while keeping their collaboration secret from the majority of surface dwellers who weren't ready to understand the true complexity of human society. The challenge now was transitioning from covert cooperation to open partnership without triggering social disruption that could destabilize both communities. Surface populations would need to adjust to the knowledge that their cities housed far more residents than they had ever suspected. Underground populations would need to emerge from concealment that had protected them for millennia, while maintaining the stability that had allowed them to survive when previous surface civilizations had collapsed. The chamber she stood in represented more than hidden architecture. It represented the possibility of urban development that could accommodate both surface and underground populations openly, creating integrated communities that could draw on the capabilities of both civilizations to address challenges that neither could solve alone. As Dr. Vasquez prepared to return to the surface, she understood that her discoveries beneath Manhattan were just the beginning of revelations that would reshape human understanding of urban civilization itself. Every city, every town, every human settlement might harbor hidden populations whose existence would soon need to be acknowledged as part of humanity's transition to planetary citizenship. The surface world above continued its familiar patterns while beneath its foundations, ancient networks hummed with activity that connected every major population center in a web of cooperation that spanned the globe. The time was approaching when the hidden half of human civilization would need to reveal itself, transforming urban life in ways that would either elevate humanity to unprecedented cooperation or fragment society into incompatible communities. In chambers deep beneath the streets of Manhattan, decisions were being made that would determine whether surface and underground populations could openly share the spaces they had been secretly inhabiting together for centuries. The greatest urban planning project in human history was about to begin, and its success would determine whether Earth cities could evolve to accommodate the full complexity of planetary consciousness. The subway tunnel that had brought Dr. Vasquez to these revelations stretched back toward the surface, carrying with it the promise of changes that would transform every aspect of urban existence. Above her, 8 million New Yorkers went about their daily routines, unaware that their city housed populations whose existence would soon reshape their understanding of what it meant to live in a truly integrated planetary community. The elevator carried her toward a surface that would never look the same, bearing knowledge that connected every major city in a network of cooperation that had been hidden in plain sight. The urban landscape that awaited her return was about to be revealed as something far more complex and wonderful than any surface dweller had ever imagined possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plaza as Dr. Vasquez emerged from the subway entrance, her consciousness still resonating with frequencies that no surface dweller should have been able to perceive. The familiar sounds of Manhattan traffic, construction noise, and human conversation now carried layers of meaning that her enhanced awareness could decode, like a symphony written in languages she had never learned, but somehow understood. Every footstep on concrete revealed the hollow spaces beneath, chambers and passages that extended through the city's foundation like a vast root system. Her modified neural pathways detected the subtle vibrations of activity occurring just meters below the sidewalks where thousands of commuters hurried past, completely unaware that their daily routines unfolded above civilizations whose existence challenged every assumption about urban life. The buildings that rose around her no longer appeared as isolated structures, but as components in an integrated system that served both visible and hidden populations. The electromagnetic signatures emanating from their foundations revealed connection points to networks that carried power, data, and communication through channels that city planners had never mapped. Every skyscraper, every office complex, every residential building was participating in an infrastructure that extended far beyond its official specifications. Dr. Vasquez realized that her enhanced perception was allowing her to see New York as it truly existed, not just as the surface city that appeared in tourist guides and municipal documents, but as a three-dimensional community that utilized every cubic meter of available space. The city's true population might be double or triple the official census numbers, with underground residents contributing to urban functionality while remaining completely invisible to standard demographic analysis. The implications extended beyond simple population statistics to encompass questions of governance, resource distribution, and social organization that challenged fundamental assumptions about how cities operated. If underground populations had been participating in urban life while maintaining their concealment, they must have developed systems for coordination and decision-making that operated parallel to surface municipal government. Her enhanced hearing detected communication patterns that suggested these parallel systems were far more sophisticated than surface political structures. decision-making processes that incorporated input from both surface and underground residents, resource allocation algorithms that optimize distribution across both visible and hidden populations, conflict resolution mechanisms that prevented disputes between communities from escalating into disruptions that could affect either group. The city she was observing functioned more smoothly than pure surface management should have made possible. Traffic flow patterns that seemed to optimize themselves beyond the capabilities of existing control systems. Utility distribution networks that maintained reliability rates that exceeded engineering predictions. Emergency response coordination that appeared to benefit from information sources that official channels couldn't access. Underground civilizations weren't just sharing space with surface dwellers. They were actively contributing to urban management in ways that enhanced rather than competed with surface operations. Their advanced capabilities and longer temporal perspectives allowed them to anticipate and prevent problems that would have overwhelmed purely surface-based municipal systems. Dr. Vasquez understood that she was witnessing urban evolution that had been occurring for centuries without surface recognition. Cities had been gradually transforming into integrated communities that served multiple forms of consciousness, each contributing their unique capabilities to collective functionality. The process had been so gradual that surface populations had adapted to enhanced urban services without questioning their origins. But the accelerating pace of technological development and environmental pressures was forcing this hidden integration into the open. Underground populations could no longer maintain their concealment while providing the level of assistance necessary to prevent urban systems from collapsing under increasing demands. The choice was between revealing their existence or watching surface cities fail under challenges they weren't equipped to handle alone. The revelation that urban life had been a collaborative effort between multiple forms of consciousness reframed every aspect of city planning and development. The greatest metropolitan achievements might have been joint projects between surface and underground intelligence, combining human creativity with capabilities that exceeded normal biological parameters. The cities that had seemed like purely human accomplishments were actually evidence of cooperation between species that had been working together while maintaining the illusion of separation. Walking through Manhattan's streets with her enhanced awareness active, Dr. Vasquez could perceive the constant flow of coordination occurring between surface and underground populations. Maintenance activities that prevented infrastructure failures before they could affect surface operations. Traffic management adjustments that optimized flow patterns through mechanisms that exceeded the capabilities of visible control systems. Emergency preparations that anticipated problems through information gathering networks that operated beyond official channels. The city was alive in ways that surface dwellers had never suspected, functioning as a single organism that incorporated both visible and hidden components in seamless integration. Every major urban center might operate according to similar principles, with underground populations contributing to functionality while surface residents remained unaware of the true complexity of their communities. But maintaining this integration required continuous adaptation as surface technology advanced and environmental challenges intensified. Underground civilizations were being forced to reveal more of their capabilities to prevent system failures that could devastate both surface and underground populations. The gradual revelation process that had been occurring for decades was accelerating toward full disclosure that would transform urban life permanently. Dr. Vasquez realized that her role as an enhanced individual was to serve as a bridge during this transition, helping surface populations understand that the cities they thought they knew were actually collaborative communities that had been functioning as integrated systems all along. The shock of discovering underground neighbors would be tempered by the recognition that these relationships had been beneficial rather than threatening. The challenge was managing the transition from hidden cooperation to open partnership without disrupting the delicate balance that had allowed both communities to thrive. Surface populations would need to adjust their understanding of urban life to accommodate residents they had never known existed. Underground populations would need to abandon concealment that had protected them for centuries while maintaining the stability that had made their contributions possible. The process would require unprecedented cooperation between surface and underground leadership to coordinate revelation in ways that strengthened rather than fragmented urban communities. The success of this transition would determine whether Earth's cities could evolve to openly accommodate the full spectrum of planetary consciousness or fragment into incompatible enclaves that competed rather than collaborated. As Dr. Vasquez walked through Manhattan's familiar streets, with her enhanced perception revealing their hidden complexity, she understood that she was witnessing the beginning of urban transformation that would reshape every aspect of metropolitan life. The cities of the future would openly integrate surface and underground populations, creating communities that could draw on capabilities from across the spectrum of planetary intelligence. The greatest urban planning challenge in human history was about to begin, and its success would determine whether Earth's metropolitan centers could evolve to serve the needs of all their residents, both visible and hidden. The morning sunlight that illuminated Manhattan's towering skyline also cast shadows that concealed networks of cooperation spanning the globe, connecting every major city in relationships that would soon emerge from darkness into the light of open acknowledgement. In the depths below, ancient intelligences prepared for revelations that would transform urban civilization itself, while above, surface dwellers continued their routines unaware that their cities were about to reveal themselves as something far more complex and wonderful than any human architect had ever imagined possible. The elevator that had carried Dr. Vasquez between worlds continued its journey, connecting realms of consciousness that were preparing to merge into communities that would reshape the meaning of planetary citizenship itself. The surface facility's fluorescent lights flickered as Dr. Vasquez entered the debriefing room, carrying with her knowledge that would forever alter humanity's understanding of our planet. Behind her, sealed passages held civilizations that had watched our species evolve from scattered tribes into a global community. Ahead lay the monumental task of preparing humanity for revelations that would challenge every assumption we've made about our place in the universe. The evidence we've uncovered tonight points to a truth so profound it reshapes the very foundations of human understanding. From Dr. Chen's carved doorway in Mammoth Cave to the harmonic communications detected beneath Manhattan's streets, every discovery tells the same story. Earth's interior houses, civilizations whose technological capabilities and accumulated wisdom dwarf our greatest achievements. They've been watching us, guiding us, preparing us for contact that would determine whether humanity joins a planetary community that has maintained stability for millions of years. The underground beings possess technologies that manipulate matter through acoustic resonance, transportation networks that connect continents through passages we never imagined, and collective consciousness that operates as a unified planetary intelligence. They've survived the rise and fall of 7 previous surface civilizations, preserving knowledge from each in crystalline libraries that could solve every challenge humanity faces. Yet they've learned that premature revelation of advanced knowledge often accelerates rather than prevents civilizational collapse. Our journey through Earth's hidden depths has revealed that humanity stands at the same crossroads that destroyed our predecessors. Climate change, resource depletion, social fragmentation, all following patterns that ancient observers have witnessed before. But unlike previous surface civilizations, we've developed something unique, a global communication network that allows real-time coordination across the entire planet. This development has convinced underground civilizations that we might be ready for partnership rather than observation. The biological enhancements experienced by Dr. Blackwood and Dr. Vasquez represent more than individual transformation. They're the activation of genetic potential that exists within every human being, dormant capabilities that underground civilizations seeded into terrestrial evolution over millions of years. We're discovering that our own development has been gently guided by intelligences preparing us for eventual contact when we demonstrated both technological capability and wisdom necessary for planetary citizenship. But the most startling revelation is that this contact has already been occurring. Enhanced individuals have been working within human society for generations, serving as bridges between worlds while maintaining the illusion of separation. The greatest achievements of human civilization may have been collaborative efforts between surface creativity and underground wisdom, partnerships that accelerated our development while preventing the catastrophic mistakes that destroyed previous surface species. The Vatican's classified archives, military intelligence briefings, and urban infrastructure discoveries all confirm the same reality. Underground civilizations aren't hidden in remote cave systems or abandoned mines. They're integrated into the foundations of our greatest cities, contributing to functionality that makes modern urban life possible. The electrical grids that power our homes, the water systems that sustain our communities, the transportation networks that connect our societies, all operate more efficiently than purely surface technology should allow. Every major metropolitan area may house populations that exceed official census numbers. Residents who've been maintaining city systems while remaining invisible to municipal authorities. The resilience that allows urban centres to survive natural disasters and infrastructure crises may result from assistance by beings whose capabilities exceed anything surface engineering has achieved. Yet for all their advancement, these ancient civilizations face challenges that resonate with human experience. They've achieved stability at the cost of dynamism, wisdom through conservative caution that prevents the innovative breakthroughs that characterize human development. They see in us something they've lost, the chaotic creativity that comes from short lifespans and rapid generational change. Our music, art, and technological innovations demonstrate problem-solving approaches their careful methods would never discover. This is why contact is occurring now. Underground civilizations need fresh perspectives on challenges they've been managing through pure stability rather than solving. Humanity offers innovative energy that could enhance their million-year wisdom, while they provide the knowledge to avoid catastrophic mistakes that destroyed our predecessors. The negotiation isn't just about sharing resources or technology. It's about restructuring human civilization to operate on sustainable principles while maintaining the creative dynamism that makes us valuable partners. The probability matrices witnessed in the deepest chambers show potential futures branching from the choices we make in the coming years. Some paths lead to integration, where human creativity contributes to planetary management, while learning practices that ensure survival for millions of years. Other branches show consequences of continued current trends, conflicts that escalate beyond control, technological developments that outpace wisdom, social fragmentation that prevents the cooperation necessary for survival. The underground civilizations aren't offering salvation. They're offering partnership in a process that requires humanity to transform itself. The knowledge exists to solve climate change, eliminate disease, provide clean energy for millennia, but accessing it requires proving we can handle such power responsibly. Previous surface civilizations that received too much information too quickly used it destructively, following the same pattern that led to their extinction. The test isn't academic. According to observations spanning millions of years, species that successfully navigate technological adolescence develop collective decision-making capabilities that extend planning horizons beyond individual lifespans. They learn to evaluate choices for consequences that unfold across centuries, rather than electoral cycles. They shift from growth-based economies to optimization systems that enhance rather than deplete planetary resources. But perhaps the most profound transformation required is psychological. Humanity would need to accept that we're not the dominant intelligence on Earth. We would be joining a community whose knowledge and capabilities dwarf our greatest achievements. The adjustment required for this transition could be as difficult as the technological and social changes. The enhanced individuals emerging from underground contact represent humanity's future if we choose partnership over isolation. Dr. Blackwood's expanded consciousness, Dr. Vasquez's urban perception abilities, the Vatican's secret network of spiritually enhanced intermediaries all demonstrate human potential that has been dormant for millennia. Contact with underground civilizations doesn't impose alien modifications, but awakens capabilities that evolution prepared within our genetic structure. These enhancements spread through proximity and shared experience, creating cascade effects that could gradually transform human consciousness on a species-wide scale. Enhanced individuals perceive reality through dimensions that include emotional resonance, electromagnetic communication, and temporal awareness that extends beyond immediate concerns. They represent bridges between current human limitations and the expanded awareness necessary for planetary citizenship. The governments briefed on these discoveries face challenges that exceed any previous diplomatic complexity. How do you negotiate with intelligences whose temporal perspectives span geological epochs? How do you maintain national sovereignty when territorial boundaries exist in only 2 dimensions, while planetary management requires 3-dimensional cooperation? How do you prepare military forces for contact with beings whose capabilities could neutralize any surface-based defense system? The questions extend beyond politics to encompass every aspect of human civilization. Religious institutions grapple with theological implications that could expand understanding of divine creation or shatter faith communities unprepared for revelations about cosmic complexity. Educational systems must prepare students for participation in planetary communities that include multiple forms of consciousness. Economic structures based on continuous growth must evolve toward models that optimize distribution across sustainable resource cycles. Yet the most immediate challenge is communication itself. Underground civilizations operate through harmonic languages that convey emotional context, philosophical frameworks, and temporal perspectives that span millions of years. Learning to think and communicate on their scale requires expanding human consciousness beyond anything our species has previously achieved. The enhanced individuals serve as translators and guides, but true partnership requires collective evolution that touches every human being. The acoustic signatures detected by monitoring stations worldwide suggest that underground networks are coordinating responses to surface awareness of their existence. The age of hidden observation is ending, replaced by direct contact that will challenge every assumption human civilization has made about our place in the universe. The choices made in the coming months will determine whether humanity earns partnership in planetary stewardship or continues trajectories that led previous civilizations to extinction. As you drift toward sleep, remember that beneath every step you take, ancient networks pulse with communications that span continents. In chambers deeper than human exploration has reached, crystalline libraries preserve wisdom from civilizations that rose and fell while our species was still learning to shape stone tools. The beings who maintain these archives have watched 7 attempts at surface intelligence, preserving knowledge from each while hoping that the 8th would prove capable of wisdom necessary for survival. The elevator that carried our explorers between worlds continues its journey, connecting realms of consciousness that challenge everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. The surface that seems so familiar and solid is revealed as a thin shell, covering mysteries that dwarf every question we've ever asked about our origins, our purpose, our destiny as a species. Tonight, we've glimpsed evidence of civilizations whose existence transforms human understanding of reality itself. Tomorrow, the world awakens to revelations that will either elevate us to partnership with planetary intelligence or test whether we can handle knowledge that our predecessors used to destroy themselves. The greatest discovery in human history has only just begun, and its implications will echo through every choice we make, every breath we take, every dream we dare to dream. The darkness that once concealed Earth's deepest secrets is giving way to illumination that reveals a universe far more complex and wonderful than we ever imagined possible. In that revelation lies both our greatest opportunity and our ultimate test as a species standing at the threshold of transformation that will determine whether we join the eternal dance of planetary consciousness or fade into the silence that claimed those who came before us. The journey into Earth's hidden heart continues, and the path ahead leads through mysteries that challenge us to become something greater than we ever believed possible. The question isn't whether we're ready for contact with underground civilizations. The question is whether they're ready for us, or